worked with a private investor to get funding for a property? Just say, yeah, that's me, if you've done either of those things so far. And if you haven't, just type no. No, not yet. That's going to help me tailor this specific as we go through it. Okay? So yes, 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 no, a couple no's, not yet. Okay, so it's like half and half, no, no, not yet. Okay, cool. If I start talking about stuff that's like too complicated, then feel free, just type a question over in the chat. We'll make sure that we demystify anything that we're talking about here, okay? I want to make this as simple as possible. So basically, best buyer for me, I'm going to walk you through the 3 keys to help double profits when you're working with the best buyer. What happened to me is that I started in this business by doing buy, fix, and sell. That's like I saw all the TV shows and I got excited and jumped in there and started doing that stuff. Well, fast forward with a little bit of time, I heard about this thing called wholesaling. And when I first heard about it, I went to my title company, the one that had been doing the buy, fix, and sell for me. And I went to my title closer named Mary and I said, hey, Mary, I just heard about this wholesaling thing. Can you help me with this? Like, I want to wholesale some properties. Can your team like do the paperwork and stuff for it and close them? We're going to do double closes and assignments of contract. And Mary looked at me really concerned. She leaned in and she said, Nate, that's illegal. You can't wholesale. What? Mary, I just heard that you can. Like, I'm seeing other people do it. I have friends that do it. Like, what do you mean it's illegal? She said, no, it's not legal. Don't get into the wholesale stuff. Here, this was like an experienced closer, someone that had been in the business for a long time, working at a really reputable title company, telling me like, no, you can't do it. My dreams of wholesaling were shattered for a moment. And then I got out of that meeting, and then I called one of my friends that was wholesaling, and I said, hey, like, who do you use for this stuff? And he said, well, Nate, you got to call Brian Holscher. He owns a title company. He's an attorney. He knows this stuff. I call Brian. Brian sits me down. Brian draws out everything wholesaling. And he said, Nate, the reason that some title companies and some people in general just don't, they think that wholesaling is illegal is because they just don't understand it. And when someone doesn't understand it, it's an easy thing for them to say, no, we don't do that. You can't do that. But if you do it the legal way, contractually, then it's totally fine. And I'm like, okay, can you be my title closer? He said, yes. And then my journey into the wholesaling world was born. I started with Brian Holscher, his law firm. If you're in Minnesota, I highly recommend checking him out. That's where I started wholesaling. And so I start wholesaling to buyers, and I start this hunt that probably a lot of, especially the newer folks are on right now, like you try to find buyers to take properties from you if you choose to go on that exit path. Well, if you're choosing a different exit, if you're like, well, Nate, I don't want to wholesale to buyers, then what I want you to do is insert the word investor for buyer in everything that I'm about to teach you. Investor for buyer, okay? The reason is because what I found is that these buyers, they're interchangeable. Sometimes they'll be your private lender. In fact, one of my first private lenders for my wife, he was a buyer of ours. He had bought rental properties from us. And then we came to him with one property that we didn't want to sell him, and we said, hey, will you be a private lender on this property? And he said, sure, why not? And he jumped in as a private lender. So I want you to be able to use that term interchangeably, buyer, investor, however you want, okay? But these are the 3 keys for you being able to double your profits in your business if you do these, you search out the best one. So we're going to hit the best buyer. We're going to hit how to get buyers on demand. We're going to also cover who the real asset is in each equation, okay? So my wife got this schoolhouse under contract. It was originally like a 1800s built one-room schoolhouse on this farmland out in the middle of nowhere. It's outside the city. And she came to me with it. And she said, hey, I got this one under contract. The seller wants me to work with them. Do you got any buyers for this? And I'm like, that's really odd. You know, I'll put it out there. Like, you got it for a good price, so I'll put it out there. Let's just see what happens. And so I put it out there to all the buyers that were on my list. And my buyers were like crickets. The ones that I called, everyone said, no, I'm not interested in that. It's too far from the city. It's, I can't really do much with that. And I came back to her and I'm like, I'm so sorry, Jennifer. I can't find a buyer for you. And she's like, well, we got to find a buyer. And I'm like, well, what are you going to do? She said, I don't know, but I've made a commitment to the seller. and I'm going to follow through. I'm going to get this thing a buyer. I said, okay, great. Next thing, she comes back to me 2 days later and she said, guess what? I found a buyer. I'm like, what? How'd you find a buyer for that? She did all of these posts that we teach here, social media, okay? She did all these posts and she got this buyer that came along and bought it, and she ended up getting a good double-digit profit on this thing. Shocked me, frankly speaking, because my buyers are crickets on this. Totally shocked me. That's when I learned about this concept of the unique buyer. There are unique buyers out there for some of these weird things. It's just our job to get properties in front of them. Right now, we have unique buyers, and we also have speculative buyers that are buying stuff right now. Those two buyers, even when everyone else is saying no, for whatever reason, they're going to say yes. And they're going to buy with or without you. Okay? So even if someone comes to you and like they want to buy a property and they're willing to pay more than you think it's worth, just you got to understand in the marketplace, especially in the cycle we're at right now, depending on where you're investing geographically, you just have to understand like they're going to buy with or without you. So let them take properties from you. Okay? We've got a client that we've been working with for a couple of months, and he got stuck early on this thing where he was trying to buy with basically last year or 2 years ago prices. He's looking hard at comps and evaluating everything really, really tight, and he ends up making offers that are substantially lower than everybody else. And so we asked him, well, what's happening with those deals after you missed them? And he said, well, another wholesaler just got this one, and then another fix and flip guy just got this one. And we're like, okay, well, naturally, if you're bidding way down here and other people are taking them and profiting off them, you've got to adjust with the marketplace. What's happening with a lot of those, if you're in a really hot market, is they're going to these unique buyers or the speculative buyers. What I want to do now is I want to sketch out probably the most important thing that I learned when it comes to these buyers, okay? I'm going to switch cameras so you can see over here. And I think this will pop for you guys. Okay, so the flipper versus the landlord. These are going to be the two that probably come up more often than any other type of buyer that you're ever going to work with. Okay, the unique ones, the speculators, they're out there too, but they're just not as frequent as the flipper and the landlord. And I want you to participate with me and help me fill in the blanks on this. When a flipper buys a house, let's just pretend that they each tell you that they have $200,000 cash, okay? I want you to pretend they have $200,000 cash, and they're going to buy a property from you, and then they're going to do their thing. They're either going to fix it and sell it, what the flipper does, or they're going to rent it out like the landlord does, okay? When a flipper does a rehab, so I'll put rehab here, how long does that take? Let me know in the chat. How long in months does a flipper take to do a rehab? Is it 1 month, 10 months, a year? How long? 3 to 4 months, 2 to 3 months, 1 to 3 months, 3 to 4 months from Mary. Martin says 3 to 6. Christopher says 3. Okay, so I'm going to go kind of at like the average in here. I'm kind of seeing it's around like 4. It just depends. There's variables to that too, like how big is the rehab? Gladys says 6 months. Some people take a year to do flips, literally. Like they take a full year. It just is what it is. You know what? I got to also stop the screen share so you can see this a little bit bigger. That'll be a little bit more helpful. Okay, so after rehab, they have to list the property for sale, okay? When they list it for sale, how long does that property sit on market before it gets an offer? Assuming that they price it right, not sit and try to do bidding wars, but they price it reasonably. How long does it sit on market before it gets a reasonable offer? 2 weeks, 2 weeks, okay. In this market, yeah, and it depends. Like some of you might be thinking, well, actually in my market, it takes 2 months. And go back in time a little bit, it used to be like 4 months. But right now, depending on where you are geographically, probably pretty fast, okay? So they list it. Now, when they get that offer, that doesn't mean that they close as soon as they get the offer. They don't get their money back right then. They have to now go through escrow. They have to go through the inspection. They have to go through the appraisal. And we're assuming that they're using financing, which more than 90% of buyers do. So they got to go through this process. How long does that escrow process take? How long from contract date to closing are we talking about here? 60 to 90 days, 3 to 6 weeks, 30 to 45 days from Martin. Okay, 45 to 60 days, 6 weeks from Tammy. Tammy's a pro. I don't know if we can qualify her answer or not. Yeah, okay, yes, we can. Okay, so all good answers, and it kind of depends on which lender's doing it, but most lenders, their bottleneck is the appraisal. Like, I'm doing an appraisal on a property right now. That's the whole thing. Like, we got all the paperwork done, the title work is done, but the appraiser literally booked out 6 weeks just to get the appraiser in, okay? So I think that your answers between 1 to 3 months are accurate. I'm gonna go 2 months, because even when a lender promises that they're gonna have it done in 4 weeks or 5 weeks, they always fail, in my experience, because of the appraiser, okay? So 2 months. And now they close. So what are we looking at here? We got 4 plus a half plus 2. We're at like 6.5 months. How many deals in 1 year can this flipper do with this money, this 200K? How many deals a year can they do with that 200K, assuming they're recycling the same money over again? Approximately 2, one person says. So it's between 1 and 2. Depends. Some of these timelines could go longer, all that kind of stuff, between 1 and 2. Now let's talk landlord, okay? The landlord, when they're doing a rehab, it's literally usually paint, sometimes carpet. They don't have to redo kitchens and bathrooms and all that kind of stuff. They're renting it out. So how long should we put for the rehab for the landlord? What do you think? Half a month, 1 to 2 weeks? Yeah, that's pretty good. So I'll put 0.5, okay? Now, they list it for rent. How long does it take to get a qualified application once they list it? How long does it take to get a qualified tenant application once they list it? Signed lease. 2 weeks is pretty much the consistent answer. I'll go with that. I just spoke with one of our clients. She had posted in our group that Lily, she was applying for rentals herself, and she said that she submitted an offer to rent a place, offering a year in advance prepaid rent, and there were multiple offers, multiple renters the first day in market, and they completely went with somebody else. They didn't even consider her application, because there's such a demand right now for rentals. So this really could be smaller, but let's just keep it a half a month for now. Okay, so now the next step for a landlord to get their money back, essentially, they don't go through like escrow and close. What they do is they refinance the property, and assuming that they've already, got a relationship with their credit union or community bank, things like that, these refinances go pretty fast. So I'm going to fill in the blank for this, because I've done these a lot. I've done these well over 100 properties now, and usually it's about a month. The only bottleneck is the appraisal, just like the other appraiser side, okay? So we're at about even if we go 1.5 months, we'll give it that. We've got 2 months, we've got 2.5 months. How many deals in a year can this landlord gain money? After they refinance, they get most of their cash back. How many deals in a year can they do with that same money? Okay, seeing numbers anywhere from 4 to 10 right now. 6, yeah, all in the ballpark. Some of this stuff can kind of vary a little bit, but 4+ deals. Now, as a pure business perspective, if you could work with someone that's going to buy 2 properties from you, or someone that's going to buy 4 properties from you in the same amount of time, who would you choose, the 2 or the 4? They can buy 2 properties from you in a year, or they can buy 4 properties from you. Okay, 4 all day. Thank you. That makes sense. Okay, that is part of the equation. Just from a pure numeric standpoint, we want the person that can do more business with us. Like, that's just general business economics. The second part of the equation that we really have to wait on, it's even more important than the number of transactions they can do, is how much are they going to pay you? How much money will end up in your pocket at the end of the transaction? This is where most people miss it. I missed it early on too. Okay, what most people miss is that the flipper, they have to buy it lower than the landlord does. Why? Why do you think that is? Why does a flipper have to buy it at a lower price, discounted price, versus the landlord? Why do you think the flipper is buying it lower right now? Terry says to make a profit. Yeah, they got to factor in profit. Yeah. Tammy says rehab's more expensive. Hal says rehab. Yeah, everyone's spot on so far. So remember that rehab, the landlord's doing paint and carpet. Like they're in and out for like $5,000 in some of these small starter homes, maybe 10 or 15,000 at most. The flipper, they got to do flooring plus kitchen plus appliances plus light fixtures plus they got to do the works to compete in the marketplace. Like they got to clean this place up pretty good. So the rehab costs more. So that means when you come to them with a property, they're going to always try to push you down in price. They're going to constantly be pushing you down. One of the folks that you got to see on here earlier, Melissa, she's worked with buyers before. And I remember one of the first conversations that I had with her about buyers, she had this guy that was trying to make an offer on one of the properties that she was showing. And they kept trying to lowball. And I asked the question, is that buyer a flipper or a landlord? And she came back and she said, well, he's a flipper. I'm like, fire him. It's not your client. Fire him. It's not worth your time. Not in this market. Who I'm working with right now, who we're serving right now, we're going to talk more about this later, but we try to go after a niche. It's much better. It actually like helps you so much when you choose one lane, your niche, whatever your calling is in the world. Well, our niche is landlords. That's who we serve. We help landlords sell. We help landlords buy. Like we serve it on both sides. We've got folks like you're going to meet Tammy in a little bit. She has a totally different niche. Her niche is awesome. You might choose a totally different niche too. You might like probates or something like that. You might choose closures or pre-foreclosures. There's so many different niches that are out there. Well, for our niche with the landlords, what we're doing is we're bringing them what they want, but we also know that they're going to pay us more. We know because they don't have to do the big rehab. We know because they don't have to sit on market and account for paying taxes, insurance, and vacancy costs, utilities, all that kind of stuff. So the landlords will pay more. I took forever to discover that. I took like 5 years of doing transactions to discover that the landlord buyer was better. You can probably imagine when I wholesaled to the flippers for those 4 or 5 years in the middle, my profits were way less, literally like under 5,000 average per deal. When I discovered this and I switched over to the landlord buyer and some of these unique buyers, my profits went way up. So my hope is that what you take from that part right there so far is that you're going to work with unique buyers and landlord buyers. Is everybody cool with that? Let me know in the chat. Say yes. I don't want you to go through the pain that I did for 5 years and get frustrated and not be able to get deals done, because what happens if you're trying to serve flippers is that they're going to come back to you asking for more off the price, like less price, and you're not going to be able to make deals happen. It ends up inevitable that you have to go back to the seller and you won't be able to get the deal done, and I don't want that to happen, okay? So I was at this, they used to do these things called real estate investment clubs. After the whole shakeup in the world, the pandemic and whatnot, a lot of these have moved online. But prior to that, I physically went to a real estate investment club. And there was a gentleman that stood in the back at the end, and he said, hey, if anyone here happens to have any properties, I have around $5 million I'm trying to use to buy properties. My phone number is... And he read his phone number off, kind of shouting it from the back of the room to everybody. He read it off twice really slow. When I heard buy properties, $5 million, I got out my old-fashioned pen and paper and I wrote that down. $5 million, here's his phone number. I called him the next day, okay? What happened is that I did a quick call with him. We had some good rapport. I said, hey, I can definitely help you. Probably help me more if I could connect with you quick face-to-face and really dial in what you're looking for, and we can help you. Well, he said, okay, cool. So I ended up going to his office a couple of days later. I sit down with him. He tells me his whole vision and what they're going to do and all that kind of stuff with like all these properties and what they're looking for. And then I'm like, hey, I'm just curious. Out of everybody that was in that room, there were over 100 people there. I'm just curious, like, I know I called you. You must have had a whole bunch of other calls too. Like, how many people called you? And he said, two people. Like, what? Only 2 people have called you to help you? He's like, yeah, I don't know, that group there, I thought they would be more excited about it, but 2 people. And I said, hey, I'm just curious, like, who's the other person? Because I probably know him. And then he told me the other guy's name, and I'm like, yeah, I know him. He's in that group too. Okay, no problem. anyways, this was the start. Like, this should paint a little bit of vision that not everybody out there, even when they announce they've got capital and things like that, they don't have time to do what you and I do, okay? They, like this particular person, he was in the business of taking money from other people and then putting it to work for them. He raised capital. He would, I guess you would call him a hedge fund, so to speak. And so for him, he was in that business. Bring money in, place capital. I'm in the business of bringing properties to people like that. Like, that's awesome, okay? So it was a perfect match. So what we did then is we said, okay, let's bring you some properties. So we brought him some properties. And the first 4 properties that I brought him, they went pretty darn well up until the very tail end of the 4th one. The 4th one, at closing or right before closing, there were some inspection issues